Welcome back to House of Oon. So on today's episode, I'm going to be modifying this intercooler. Now I bought this a few years ago from, I think it was Auto Technica for like 200 bucks. So it was a nice and cheap intercooler. It was originally destined for my E38A VR4 Galant, but that never ended up happening. So instead of having it sit on the shelf for the rest of its life, I decided to modify it to suit my patrol. So basically what I'm just going to do is cut the end tanks off, make some new end tanks with the outlets facing down, and that'll suit the new setup very well. So let's get into it. Alright, now that I've got the intercooler roughly sitting where it needs to, I now need to find a new position for this brace. So originally it was there, but as you can see that's not even halfway into the intercooler. So instead of having a heap of overhang like that, I'm going to relocate it to roughly there. But as you can see, there's no hole there because Nissan never designed it to have a brace there. So what I'm going to be using to solve that issue is this nutsert gun. So I just got this off eBay. It wasn't very dear, it's like 40 bucks or something like that. You get a whole kit full of nutserts, and basically the nutsert just screws in on top. You drill your hole into here, put your nutsert in, and it's basically like a little threaded hole then. So that's what I'll be using for mounting this brace. Well, as you've seen, I've got the intercooler all mounted up. I've still got to do a few welds and clean up a few sharp corners on the bracketry that I've just made up. And I'm also thinking that I'm going to have to move this factory bracing a bit further out to make room for the end tank, but I'm not going to know until I make the end tank. So it's off to make those end tanks. Well, my GoPro decided to not record the last few videos that I just recorded, so let's run through what I've just done. So I'm pretty sure we left off with doing this last bend, and it was basically just a repetition of that for the next ones, like so. And I basically just got the outlet, put it roughly where it's going so I can get my text line mark of where I want my bend to start. So that was pretty simple. And then with this plate here, I just got the hole saw out, put a hole saw through it. The hole saw wasn't as big as what I really needed, so I just finished the rest off with a die grinder. So it's not perfectly circular, but it's not going to restrict flow or anything because the hole is slightly bigger than what the outlet is, which is always nice. Now all of these end tanks I've made out of 3mm aluminium. So we're basically ready to weld it up now. So we'll chuck it like that, and then the top piece will go on top like so. And if you're wondering why the alley has all of these marks on it, that's from the guillotine, because I used the guillotine to cut all of this outer radius, and it was just a whole pile of little cuts, but that's alright, she's no show car, so let's get on with some welding. Alright, we've come to the part of the episode now where it's tip time, but only the tip. So tip number 1 is grab yourself a scrap bit of steel or alley and put it over the fins when you go to weld it. That way you can rest your arm or your elbow on the intercooler without actually having to damage all the fins. Tip number 2, do all the welds on the bottom side of your intercooler first so that you can get all your shitty welds out of the way, because they're generally the ones that aren't getting seen. Then you can flip your intercooler over and do all your mint welds on top. 100% of the time, it works almost never. Now I just wanted to touch on why I actually use this intercooler. So like I mentioned at the start of the video, is because I had it on the shelf, but also because it's 300 deep by 450 wide. So some of the intercoolers that you buy on the market, such as the cross-country intercooler, they're 300 deep as well, but instead of being 450 wide, they're 600 wide. So as you can imagine, the intercooler comes over in the engine bay a fair bit further, by roughly 150 mil. And as you can see by my dual battery there, which I've relocated further rearwards in the engine bay, that would then become a bit of an issue with clearance and whatnot. So it's a lot easier to work on or in the engine bay with a slightly smaller intercooler. Now, yes, you lose a bit of efficiency. You also lose a little bit of efficiency because it's a cheap intercooler rather than a top quality core. But with the power levels that I'm going to be running, I doubt it's going to be any issue. It's still like 3 times the size of the factory intercooler, so I think it will work perfectly fine for this application. Now, what I've done with this part of the bracket is I've basically just cut out this middle section here, so just between here and here, and I've gotten rid of that, and this piece here is actually off the other side, which I cut out. So I just grabbed that from that side, put it on this side. I've rotated it to the position that best suits where the cooler is, and if you check that out, you'd barely even know that it wasn't like that from factory now that it's been welded and ground back. So what if the intercooler just isn't efficient enough in keeping the air cool? Well, I've thought of that. So my plan is to whack this 12-inch Spell fan on there. Now, if anyone knows thermo fans, you'll know that Spell is one of the best in the game. So this is a very high CFM fan, and it should keep the intercooler more than cool enough and be able to pull enough air through it to cool it down that bit extra if it needs it. So I've left enough room. I'll just tilt the camera for a second. I've left enough room underneath there, if we can get in there, to put the thermo fan in there. So all I have to do is make up a new mount for it, and we'll be good as gold. What did you think of this episode of modifying the new intercooler for the Patrol? Let me know down in the comment section below, the good, bad, the ugly, what I can improve on, whatever. Just drop a comment, let me know. If you like this video or if you found it useful at all, please give it a thumbs up. Also consider subscribing for some new content which I'll be doing on the Patrol very soon, and I'll catch you in the next one.